Hi everyone, my name is Cindy Stites and I am from West Central Indiana. I'm 44 years old and I am currently the Director of Education for a company called Hunt to Eat, and I'm also a hunting field editor for the B.R. Shadley Sporting Report. Um, I'm also a girlfriend of 8 years and I'm a dog mom. I'm a bonus mom, former horticulturist for 25 years, and I am also a survivor of domestic violence. Um, that one's kind of hard to spit out. The rest of them, that's life. Domestic violence is a topic that a lot of people don't take the time to really talk about. It's pretty taboo. I know in my own circumstances, I was in this relationship for 11 years and no one knew. My parents didn't know, my friends didn't know until the very end. My coworkers didn't know. It was, I think I could consider it my own personal hell that I lived in the walls of my home. But I'm on the other side of that now, and I can't say that I'm better because of it, but it's definitely made me stronger. And part of the reason that I'm in a better place, the people I surround myself with now, but also getting involved in the outdoors, becoming a hunter, getting involved in conservation, all of those things have just completely changed my course. And in turn, they've given me confidence that I was lacking, to say the least. So let me back up. I met my ex-husband probably 2 or 3 years before we actually got together. We got into a relationship and everything seemed normal. There were probably red flags that were there that I just didn't pay attention to because I just didn't really know any better. Looking back now, I'm like, oh, Cindy, God. But, you're young. I was 23, 24. And when we got into this relationship, he seemed like a pretty good guy. I knew him as a friend first, and I didn't really know that there was anything bad about him. But as our relationship progressed, I quickly realized that he was not the person he portrayed himself to be in front of everybody else. He had a significant alcohol problem. He was married before, and not long into the relationship, actually, one of his prior partners reached out and said, you're making a mistake, don't do this. And of course, at that age, you think you know everything. And not only that, I think at that age too, you kind of think you can fix people, which, huge mistake. I know that now, but so I stuck with the relationship, and then things started going south. He would get angry, he would yell, he would get upset about things that didn't really make sense to me, why he would be upset. I noticed that the drinking was pretty significant. My ex-husband was a firefighter, career firefighter, so he worked a shift that was, so basically he worked every other day for 3 days, and then he had 4 days off. So he would work, for example, he worked like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, he had Tuesday, Thursday off, but then he would be off for 4 days. And then the following week he'd work Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, so on and so forth. So he had a lot of time at home, which offered up a lot of time to drink. So my mom is an alcoholic. I think I blame a lot of my parents' divorce on that, but she was a very closeted alcoholic, and I think my ex-husband was as well. I mean, a lot of people knew. His people that he was close to, or the people in the fire department, they knew, but it was just, they didn't talk about it. So the drinking continued to kind of get bad, and the more he drank, the more he yelled. It got physical probably about a year in. And I know everybody says, well, why didn't you leave? Well, unless you've been through that situation, you can't answer that. I mean, and even I've been through it. I was in it 11 years. I can't answer it. You think you can fix them. You think you can love them enough that it'll quit. You think you can solve their problems by trying to care for them and protect them and hide what's happening. And it's, you know, at that point in time, and like I said, I keep going back to I was young. I thought I knew everything. I thought I had all the answers, but it doesn't work that way. And I quickly realized that. So I stayed. And the physical abuse increased. He never hit. I think he was smarter than that. There was a lot of arm grabbing, arm twisting, shoving, everything in the house that wasn't nailed down, he threw at me. He would throw full beer cans at me. One time I was out in the front yard mowing, and he came outside and said something, and I couldn't hear him, and he pitched a beer can at me. We lived right in the middle of a large town. I mean, it was a very residential area. We lived in a subdivision, and we were on a cul-de-sac, so the neighbors were pretty close, and everybody knew each other. Super embarrassing, but that's the way it was. And I would act like it didn't happen. I'd pick the beer can up, I'd throw it away, and I'd keep mowing the yard. Remote controls, eyeglasses, full beers, telephones, picture frames. Like I said, if it wasn't nailed down, it usually got pitched in my head. And I acted like it didn't happen. I think when you're in that situation, you go into a fight or flight. And I was on the verge of fight, but I knew better. I couldn't flight because I was too scared to leave. So you block it out. You just act like it didn't happen. You pick stuff up. You just go about your business like nothing is happening around you. And that's how you deal. You know, that's how you navigate through an evening. Generally, my plan was to come home from work, to fix dinner, and to hopefully watch him fall asleep, because that was the routine. He would be drunk enough by the time I got home. He would have a yelling fit. I'd feed him and he'd pass out. And then I could sit there and actually breathe the rest of the evening. I could watch the news, I could read the paper, I could hang out with the dog without the fear of escalation. What a way to live, right? I know. So, you know, things, they continued to get worse. They continued to go downhill. His violent episodes got worse. He would go to bars during the day while I was at work, and I would actually leave my job and I would go figure out what bar he was in. I would go in and get him, got him in his vehicle because he would not let me take him home. And then I would follow him across town until he got home, holding my breath, watching him weave like this all the way down the road. You know, part of me wished that he would have had an accident. Part of me wished that he had just had a fender bender so that he could have been arrested. There's a lot of feelings that you have that aren't normal when you're in this situation. And you don't ever want to wish bad on somebody, but I think sometimes you wish things that are going to be for their own good. So I would follow him home and then I'd hurry back to work and hope that no one noticed, or I'd have people covering for me. And you know, you do so many irrational things, but as time progressed, the abuse got worse, the mental abuse, the physical abuse. There was a time, without going into gross detail, that he was yelling. I made the mistake of saying something back. He chased me through the house into the laundry room, and I was up against the door that went out into our garage, and he came at me, so I slid down on the floor, and I had just had, I think I just had either gallbladder surgery or shoulder surgery, I can't remember which. And he shoved his foot into my ribs, and he held me down on the floor with his foot, with pressure. I mean, he didn't have his foot on me. He was shoving his foot into my ribs. And I'm apologizing. I'm saying, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. You know, everything's going to be okay. I love you. And finally, whatever made him stop, he stopped and he walked away. And I got up and I just went about like it didn't happen. I just went about my evening and, you know, did laundry and, you know, whatever I was doing. acted like the whole episode didn't happen. And that's the way it was all the time. You had to act like it didn't happen so you could mentally just move on and get on with your day. And another time, you know, we were in the house, and this was probably closer to the end, but he said something to me and I said, "You son of a bitch." And he turned around and came at me with his hand like this, and it went right into my throat and slammed my head up against the front room, or the entrance door to the living room, our front door, and had me off of my toes by my neck. And he was holding me up and just this close to my face saying, you didn't know my mother. She wasn't a bitch. You have no right to say that. I mean, took literally what I said, and I couldn't breathe. And I just sat there unable to move. I didn't struggle. I just sat there, and he had me, you know, I was up off of my tippy toes, and finally he let go, and he walked away, and I went about my business like it never happened. And that was my life. That was my life for, I'd say, 10 and a half of the 11 years that we were together. I can't explain it. You know, to this day, people are like, why did you stay? Why did you stay for 11 years? I don't know. I was afraid to leave. I was afraid of him. I didn't know what to do. I was embarrassed. The shame that I felt for allowing this to happen and be part of my life and not do anything about it was humiliating. So, you know, like I said, this went on the course of that entire time. I left once. I left and got an apartment, and I stayed in that apartment for about 2 weeks. And he begged me and begged me and begged me to come back, and he said he would change, and he said he would quit drinking, and he said he wouldn't yell. And I went back, and it was great for about a month. And then it all started again. And then I was stuck again because I'd spent every little bit of money that I'd saved to get that apartment, and now it was all gone. So there's a lot of reasons I didn't leave. None of them, looking back now, in hindsight, to me now, are good enough. Like, I should have left. I regret not leaving. I regret losing 11 years of my life that I will never get back. But it's, you know, it is what it is. It happened. When people found out about the situation, they were shocked. They just had no idea. Well, some people were shocked. His buddies at the firehouse, they weren't shocked because he had went through this with his ex-wife. So they knew all about what his history was, but they said nothing. My friends were shocked because I had said nothing to them. I didn't tell them what was going on. I had one of my best friends at the time, Tracy. I worked with her, and she listened to him over the telephone. I was at work. We were in the office. I held the phone up. She could hear him screaming at me at the top of his lungs, and you couldn't even make out what he was saying. He was in a rage. I don't even know what he was yelling about. And she looked at me, and her jaw dropped. And when I got off the phone, I'm like, so? She's like, oh my God. I'm like, yeah, that's been my life, you know, for the last, whatever, at that time, however long it had been. So she knew about it during like the last year. But other than that, really nobody knew. I kept it to myself, and you know, that's a big burden to carry. I guess it was just embarrassment. You know, you don't want to go spreading that news to everybody that knows you, because then they look at you like you're less than, like you're not capable of caring for yourself, and you make poor decisions. And you know, and my ex-husband was a lot older than me, but that never had anything to do with it. I mean, he didn't have money. He was a firefighter, which they don't make much money. He had a little side gig as doing construction. He probably made a little bit more money doing that. You know, we'd go to Mexico once a year. And that trip to Mexico I looked forward to that so much, because that week, nothing went wrong. He wasn't hateful. He wasn't mean. He didn't shove me. He didn't grab me. He didn't hold me down. He didn't, you know, do any of that stuff while we were on that 1 week vacation. But as soon as we got home, it would all start again. So, you know, it's like almost this vision that, oh my God, things are going to get better. And then it goes back to the way it was, and it doesn't get better. I was sexually assaulted, which again is a mouthful. That's hard to say and hard to admit. especially to however many people are watching this. But it happened, you know. He was drunk and he's bigger than me and he held me down, and I couldn't get away from him. And he couldn't do what he set out to do because of the alcohol. And it was just, I laid there and cried until I could push him off of me and he was passed out. And that, you know, that happened a handful of occasions. But, you know, at the time, I just wanted to get out of the room. And I would just check to make sure he was asleep. And then I would go in, I'd take a shower, I'd go to the living room, I'd watch the news, and I'd read the paper, just like I did every evening. It just was a surreal, you know, it's almost like now when I look back, I can't even believe it happened. It's a whole different world from where I am now. And I look back at that and I think, God, how did I live that? How did I survive that? How did my mental, I don't even know what I want to say. How did I not break down? And I'll be honest, by the time it was almost over, right before I left, I went to the doctor, and we had the same general physician. So our doctor was the same. So I was not about to tell him what was going on because he was my ex-husband's doctor. He took my blood pressure, and my blood pressure was, and I don't remember what it was like in the 170s over the 100, like between 100 and 110. It was like under 110, but the other number was in the 170s. And he panicked. He's like, what is going on? I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, your blood pressure is through the roof. I'm like, it's work. I'm so stressed with work. And it's funny because his son worked for me. His son was a part-time employee for me in the nursery. So he knew my job wasn't that stressful, but that's what I told him, you know, and what was he going to do? Call me a liar? So I got put on blood pressure medicine. I got put on anxiety medicine. I was on Xanax, and they put me on Paxil, which Paxil is an antidepressant because I had picked all the skin off of my fingers, and I'd got to the point where I was obsessive about it because I had to find an outlet. You know, it's like people cutting themselves. Well, I picked. So I was put on all kinds of medication. I was having anxiety attacks 7-10 times a week to the point that I couldn't breathe. I had an anxiety attack in my sleep. One evening, I was home alone. My ex-husband was at the firehouse, so he wasn't even there, and I woke up in a full-blown panic attack, and I thought I was having a stroke. And I ended up going to the ER because my teeth hurt, my body was numb, my vision was blurry. I went to the ER, and they were like, you have all the signs of what you thought you had, but after they did a little digging, they were like, you had a nocturnal panic attack. I'm like, what? But when it was all said and done, the final straw was that he threatened to kill me. So we were in an argument. He followed me into the bedroom, and I said, you're too drunk to have this conversation. I'm not going to argue with you. And he said, you don't know drunk until I kill you. And I was like, that's it. And I don't know why it took me that long for the thing to switch. And I was like, I have to leave. So I had some money saved. I'd had a shoulder surgery. I was hurt at work. I had a compensation check from that. I took all of it. I hid it, and I found an apartment, and I got out. He harassed me for probably a month. I filed for divorce a month after I moved out, and 2 months after that, we were divorced. And he maybe reached out one time after that, and I've never heard from him since. And it'll be 9 years in February since I left. So all of that led me to have no confidence, no self-worth, no value. I had no idea where I was going. I had no vision what I was going to do with my life. And then fast forward about 1.5 years, and I met Chance, who is my current partner. And he introduced me to hunting, albeit he threw me into the woods and said, figure it out. But that was a challenge that I needed. And every time I went to the woods, I would learn something new. I was frustrated and I cried a lot. But you know what? When I was sitting out there, it was quiet. No one was screaming at me. I wasn't hiding from anyone. It gave me the time to heal, and it gave me the time to process what had happened for the last several years of my life. And being in the outdoors, I say this lightly, but I mean it. It saved me. Becoming a hunter saved me. It saved me from myself. It saved me from my self-pity and the challenges that it gave me a way to get my confidence back. Because every time I learned something, I'm like, wow, I can do this. And that first season, I killed my first deer, and then I went down the rabbit hole, and I have just learned so much, and I've become so involved in conservation and what it means to be outdoors and what it means to give back. And none of that would have happened if I hadn't went out there and sat by myself in the woods. And if I hadn't went out there and been frustrated and cried and thought about just, where am I going to go in life? And it gave me a focus. And when I had that focus and I started learning, it changed my life. And, now here I am, this is, almost 8 years later. Chance and I have been together for 8 years. And my life has changed. I have a different career. I'm working in the hunting industry now. I'm a mentor. I am teaching people how to hunt, which is crazy. But it's so empowering, and to have that feeling that you're making a difference, and you're watching people, you're watching that light bulb click on for them, and you're watching that first facial expression when they see an animal or when they kill their first squirrel. There's nothing better than that. Nothing. So it's just, the outdoors saved my life. Now, I wasn't suicidal, I wasn't to that point, but I was hurting, and I was a miserable, miserable person. And I was mad. I was mad at everybody. And if it hadn't been for the outdoors, if it hadn't been for Chance to encourage me to get out there, I don't know where I would be right now. So I think that, the point is, if you are struggling, or if you're dealing with something that is, really affecting your life, and you don't know which way to go, and you don't know what choices to make, even though you know that there's good choices for you, but you're stumbling and you're having trouble making them, my advice would be, go outside. I know that seems so simple, but it just puts things into perspective. And the quiet, you need the quiet, and you need time to reflect and getting in touch with nature. I don't think there's anything better than that to heal a person. I mean, you see the simplest things. You hear things. You hear the birds. You see the squirrels. You see things interact. You learn. And you don't just learn about the woods, you don't just learn about animals, but you're learning about yourself too. So, I don't know. I mean, I guess in conclusion, the vision that I have now for my life, because of the outdoors and what it has done for me, is so much different than the vision I had when I walked out of that relationship. And I'll just add this. When you talk about healing, and when you talk about, I guess, letting things go and getting closure, I went to deer camp, which is an all-women's deer camp that my dear friend Nicole Qualtieri organized in 2018. That was the first one. I drove to Montana by myself. I've never been to Montana. I've never driven across country by myself. I drove out there by myself, not knowing what I was going to get into, not knowing if I was going to be able to connect with the other women. Because, this is me. I don't do makeup. I wear a hat. I'm not girly. I just didn't know. But when I got into Montana, I saw mountains for the first time. I'm driving along, day breaks, mountains. I don't know what came over me, but I was sobbing. I mean, sobbing to the point that I couldn't hardly drive. And the reason that I was so taken, well, I think everybody reacts to mountains differently when you see them for the first time. But for me, it was, I can't believe I'm here. Who would have thought in 2011, in 2008, in 2006, who would have thought, because I didn't, that I would ever be in this place. I'd ever be driving across country. I'd be doing this for myself. Whoever thought I'd be strong enough or brave enough or curious enough to go do this on my own. And I was just taken. I was sobbing. And I called Chance. And I'm like, I just want to thank you for teaching me how to hunt. Because if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be doing this. And he's just like, whoa, lady, you need to put the phone down and drive. He's like, call me later. But it was true. I was just, it was a game changer. And it gave me closure. because that ex-husband of mine that beat me down and told me that I was nothing and told me how stupid I was and told me that I was unlovable and I was incapable, boy, he should have saw me now, because here I am driving across country to go on a hunt, something I never would have imagined. So I don't know. I mean, I just think get out there. Let nature heal you. Let the outdoors heal you, because it will. It did for me. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. If I rambled, I apologize. I'm very passionate about women in domestic violence, and I'm passionate about letting people know that it gets better, and it does. So reach out if you want to chat. Thanks. And thanks for having me. I appreciate that I was invited to be a speaker. Phyllis, thank you. It's been a pleasure.